Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep into the world of Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
Or SIF, as it's often called.
Right, SIF.
And you know what makes this deep dive so fascinating is that we're not focusing on Butler himself.
Oh.
Yeah, we're looking more at the experiences of people who were once super devoted to him and SIF,
Okay.
but have since left.
Makes sense.
And we've got a really fascinating mix of sources here.
Yeah, what do we got?
Excerpts from what look like personal Facebook posts by a Fabian Kurowski.
Interesting.
Yeah. And some online forum discussions.
What kind of discussion?
You know, where former members are sharing their experiences,
Yeah.
and even legal records about a drug trafficking operation.
Wow, okay, that's quite a mix.
It's like we've got pieces of a puzzle,
Uh-huh.
and they're all from different worlds, but they all connect back to SIF and Chris Butler.
I see it.
We'll be looking at things like allegations of financial impropriety,
Okay.
questionable political connections,
Yeah.
and the long shadow that Butler seems to cast even after people leave his organization.
This is going to be good. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Sounds good.
Starting with the basics.
Right.
Who is Chris Butler and what exactly is SIF?
So Chris Butler,
Okay.
he also goes by the name Jagadguru Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a long one.
Okay.
But anyway, he founded SIF back in the 1970s.
70s.
It's rooted in this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition of Hinduism
Okay.
with a focus on yoga and meditation.
So far sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you know, on the surface it might seem that way.
Uh-huh.
But SIF has been accused of being a cult.
Really?
Yeah, and former members describe controlling practices on an environment where Butler's authority is absolute.
Like no questioning him.
Pretty much.
Wow. Okay, so that's where those online forum discussions come in.
Exact.
Former members just sharing their experiences.
Yeah, giving us a glimpse into their lives.
Like who?
People like Alan Tibby.
Okay.
He was apparently a high-ranking SIF member.
I see. And there's also Patrick Bowler.
What about him?
His story takes a very dark turn.
That's ominous. Okay, so let's talk about Tibby first.
Sure.
What was his role in SIF?
Well, he was also known as Acharya Das,
Okay.
and he was often seen right alongside Butler.
Like a right-hand man.
Exactly.
Okay.
Kurowski's Facebook posts suggest that Tibby was involved in managing SIF's finances.
Big responsibility.
Yeah, and he even held a leadership position within SIF's branch in Australia.
So a real insider.
Oh yeah, trusted.
Okay, what about this Patrick Bowler?
So Patrick Bowler,
Uh-huh.
he went by Paramahamsa Das.
Another one.
Yeah, well anyway, he was actually convicted of drug trafficking.
Whoa.
We have legal records detailing his involvement in importing and distributing huge amounts of hashish and marijuana.
Wait, a convicted drug dealer connected to a spiritual organization?
Yeah, it's a bit contradictory.
That wasn't a bit.
It gets even more complicated.
So. Kurowski claims that even though Bowler was convicted, he was still super highly regarded within SIF.
No way.
Yeah, and he even sponsored a Brahmachari school in the Philippines.
What?
Attended by children of SIF members.
Hold on, a convicted drug dealer sponsoring a school.
I know, right?
What were they thinking?
It's a question that baffles a lot of former members.
You know it.
It seems like Bowler was able to maintain this level of respect and influence in SIF.
Even after being convicted.
Even after.
Crazy. It really makes you wonder about how power and loyalty worked within the group.
No kidding.
So it seems like Chris Butler had a lot of influence over his followers.
Yeah, a lot.
Is that something you see a lot in the experiences of those who left?
Absolutely. The forum discussions are just full of stories of people dedicating their lives to SIF,
Wow.
often giving up their careers, their finances, even their families.
Just to follow Butler's teachings.
Yeah, it's intense.
What kind of impact did this have on their lives?
Well, the stories are mixed.
How so?
Some former members say they felt a sense of purpose and belonging while they were in SIF.
Okay.
Then many others expressed disillusionment and even anger towards Butler and the organization.
I can see why.
Can you give us some specific examples of what they're saying?
Sure. One former member said that SIF leaders told them to downplay their religious affiliation
Why would they do that?
to avoid negative perceptions from the public.
Oh, I see.
Another former member claimed that members were expected to work for free.
What?
Yeah, in SIF-owned businesses.
That's a job?
Well, they called it a form of service to God.
That sounds like a lot of pressure.
It is, especially if you're told it's for your spiritual growth.
Right.
And that pressure went beyond work.
Really?
Yeah, some former members talk about the psychological toll it took on them.
Like what?
The fear of leaving,
Okay.
the potential of being shunned from their friends and family.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
So leaving SIF wasn't just about walking away.
No.
It involved, like, unraveling their entire belief system and rebuilding their lives.
That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Now, we also have some articles about QNet,
Oh, yeah.
that multi-level marketing company.
Uh-huh.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, QNet has faced a lot of accusations of operating as a pyramid scheme.
Not good.
No. And the interesting thing is Kurowski alleges that Alan Tibby was involved with QNet in India.
No kidding.
Yeah, even while he was facing legal trouble there.
So we've got potential financial impropriety.
Layered on top of everything else.
This is getting really complex.
It is, and it gets even more intriguing
Wow.
when we start looking at SIF's political connections,
Oh, boy.
which are deeply intertwined with the Gabbard family.
Okay, the Gabbards.
Yeah,
That name's been in the news quite a bit.
it has.
What's their connection to SIF?
So Mike Gabbard,
Okay.
he's a Hawaiian state senator,
Ah,
and his wife, Carol.
okay.
She served on the Hawaii Board of Education.
Got it.
They were both followers of Chris Butler
Oh.
and their daughter, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, the former U.S. representative and presidential candidate,
That's the one.
she's been linked to SIF, too.
Yes.
Wait, she's still a member?
Well, she's acknowledged Chris Butler as her guru in the past,
Okay.
but denies any current involvement with SIF.
But some people think she still is connected.
Some former members do.
Why?
They cite her political stances and associations as evidence.
That's got to be a sensitive topic.
It is.
So we've got all these key players.
They do.
Butler,
Yep.
Tibby,
Uh-huh.
Bowler,
Right.
the Gabbards.
Yep.
All connected to SIF in different ways.
It's a web.
It is. What does it all mean for the former members?
Well, the forum discussions give them a place to share their experiences.
Okay.
And try to grapple with everything about their time in SIF.
There must be a lot to process.
It is. There's a sense of wanting to understand what happened,
Uh-huh.
to find support, and to warn others
About what?
the potential pitfalls of unquestioning belief.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like these former members are really trying to reclaim their narratives
They are.
to make sense of their past and find a way forward.
Exactly.
But there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't explored yet.
Oh, what's that?
That Brahmachari school in Baguio.
Ah, yes.
What can you tell us about it?
Well, this school,
Okay.
it was exclusively for children of SIF members,
Uh-huh.
and it's drawn some disturbing allegations from former students.
What kind of allegations?
They describe a highly controlled environment,
Thanks.
strict routines,
Right.
limited contact with the outside world,
Wow.
and harsh punishments if they disobeyed.
That sounds more like a prison than a school.
It does, doesn't it?
It's really chilling.
It is.
And what's even more unsettling is that key SIF figures,
Yeah.
like Alan Tibby and Patrick Bowler,
Mm-hmm.
were allegedly involved with this school.
According to the information we have.
Wait, so even after his conviction, Bowler was still involved with the school for children.
It seems so.
What does that say about SIF's priorities?
It definitely raises some eyebrows.
It does.
And it speaks to the potential for hypocrisy and misplaced loyalty within the organization.
No kidding.
Yeah,
It sounds like there's a lot more to uncover about this school
there is.
and its role within SIF.
For sure.
Okay, so we've laid out the groundwork.
We have.
A charismatic leader,
Mm-hmm.
a controversial organization,
Right.
and a web of individuals connected through belief, power, and alleged exploitation.
That about sums it up.
What's next in our deep dive?
Now that we've got a sense of the key players and the allegations against SIF, I think it's time to delve deeper into the experiences of these former members.
Okay.
Their stories give us a human perspective on the complexities of belief, disillusionment, and the long road to recovery.
That sounds fascinating.
It is.
I'm ready to hear their stories lead the way.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dive into SIF and Chris Butler.
In part one, we laid out the groundwork. A charismatic leader, a controversial organization, and a bunch of people connected through belief, power, and what looks like exploitation. Now I want to hear the human side of all this.
Okay, let's start with Alan Tibby.
The right-hand man.
Yeah, supposedly.
Remember, he was allegedly involved in managing SIF's finances
Mhm.
and held a leadership position in Australia.
Yeah, and there's this detail from Kurowski's Facebook posts
Yeah.
that I find really disturbing.
What is it?
Kurowski claims that Tibby's own daughter was personally massaging Chris Butler.
Whoa, that's a little too close for comfort.
Uh,
What could that tell us about the dynamics within SIF.
I mean, it's just a small detail, but it's pretty telling. It suggests a huge amount of trust, maybe even reverence that Tibby had for Butler.
Right.
Like, to allow his daughter to be that close to a man who was already facing some serious allegations.
Right.
It makes you think.
It does.
It really suggests a profound belief in Butler's authority.
It's unsettling to imagine a parent putting their child in that position.
I know.
Knowing what we know now about the allegations against Butler?
Yeah, it raises questions about the boundaries between personal devotion and exploitation within SIF.
So did with other people connected to SIF?
Exactly. Like Patrick Bowler, the convicted drug trafficker.
Oh, yeah. Hard to believe he was ever seen as a respected figure within SIF.
It is, right? But even after his conviction, Karofsky says that Tibby was presenting Bowler as a friend.
Come on.
Yeah, and a devout Krishna devotee.
That's a bold move considering his criminal history.
It is. It really makes you think about what was going on within SIF's leadership.
Like, were they in denial?
Maybe.
Or were they complicit in all of this?
It's possible.
So committed to maintaining their image that they just ignored serious wrongdoing.
It's hard to say, but it really highlights the potential for hypocrisy.
Within these types of groups.
Yeah, they preach about all this spiritual purity and ethical conduct.
Right.
But then they turn a blind eye to criminal activity when it benefits them.
Wow. And remember, Bowler was also allegedly a sponsor of that Brahmachari school in the Philippines.
It's hard to reconcile those two images.
The convicted criminal.
And the benefactor of a school for children.
Exactly. So was Bowler's involvement with the school just financial?
Or was there something more going on?
It's definitely suspicious.
It is. But one thing's for sure.
What's that?
Bowler's story, just like Tibby's, casts a shadow over SIF's claims of ethical and spiritual leadership.
No kidding.
Okay,
let's move on to the Gabbard family.
All right.
Their connection to SIF is really interesting.
It is, especially with their political prominence.
Right.
The Gabbards were deeply involved in SIF. Mike and Carol were early followers of Butler.
Okay.
And their daughter, Tulsi, even spent 2 years at that Brahmachari school in Baguio.
The one we were just talking about.
That's the one.
Wow. And even though Tulsi has distanced herself from SIF,
publicly at least,
her past association with the group still raises questions.
Especially during her political career.
Must have been tough.
It was. Critics pointed to her stances on same-sex marriage and Hindu nationalism as evidence of SIF's influence.
I can see why they would say that.
But it's important to remember that Tulsi has condemned those homophobic views.
She has.
And she's positioned herself as a champion of religious freedom for all faiths.
Right. So how do we separate someone's personal beliefs from the potential influence of a group like SIF?
Especially one that played such a big part in their upbringing.
Yeah. Especially during those formative years.
It's a valid question, and it makes you wonder about the lasting impact of those early experiences.
It does. How do people figure out their lives after leaving a group like that?
A group that had so much control over their beliefs and values.
Yeah, it's like trying to untangle a giant knot.
I know.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile your past with your present?
Especially when that past involves a group with so many serious allegations against it.
Their story, particularly Tulsi's, it goes beyond SIF and Chris Butler.
What do you mean?
It speaks to this universal human experience.
Of what?
Searching for belonging.
Okay.
Trying to understand complex beliefs.
Yeah.
And ultimately defining your own identity.
That's deep. We talked about Tibby Bowler and the Gabbards.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the everyday members of SIF. The people who maybe didn't hold leadership positions.
Right.
But were still affected by their time in the organization.
Their stories matter, too.
They do.
And those online forums give them a platform.
To speak out.
To share their experiences.
And what are they saying?
It's a mix of emotions, disillusionment, anger, confusion.
Right.
But also this desire to understand what happened.
And to warn others?
Exactly.
Can you share some specific examples?
Sure. One former member talks about being pressured to give a lot of money to SIF.
Wow.
They believed it was a path to spiritual enlightenment.
Okay.
Another describes feeling trapped and isolated with almost no contact with family or friends outside the group.
It's heartbreaking to hear about the sacrifices they made.
It is.
The trust they put in Butler and SIF.
And to end up feeling betrayed and disillusioned?
It's awful.
Yeah.
It really highlights those power dynamics at play.
It does.
In these types of groups.
People are often looking for something.
When they join SIF.
Yeah, they're seeking guidance.
Okay.
Community. A sense of purpose.
Makes sense.
But that vulnerability can be exploited.
And the consequences are huge.
They are.
What about the motivations of people like Chris Butler
Yeah.
and those in leadership positions?
I mean, were they driven by genuine spiritual aspirations?
Or was there something darker going on?
Tough question.
It is.
And it's hard to answer for sure.
Right.
But looking at the experiences of these former members,
Yeah.
it paints a pretty troubling picture.
Of SIF.
Yeah, an organization that might have prioritized power and control over the well-being of its followers.
Let's talk more about that Brahmachari school in Baguio.
Oh.
Those allegations from former students are just disturbing.
They are a strict, regimented environment.
Yeah.
Limited contact with the outside world.
Right.
Harsh punishments for any disobedience. It's wild to think about growing up like that. Your whole life controlled by the teachings of one man. Yeah.
Where any questioning or disagreement is met with punishment.
It does sound more like a cult compound than a school.
It does.
Were the kids even getting a real education there?
Well, former students describe a curriculum that was very focused on SIF's teachings
Okay.
and not so much on traditional academic subjects.
Interesting.
Some even say they were discouraged from going to college
Really?
or getting jobs outside of SIF.
So they were being molded into followers from a young age.
It seems that way. And it wasn't just limiting their career choices, it was shaping their whole worldview.
That's a common tactic.
Yeah, for cults and other manipulative groups.
How so?
They isolate people,
Okay.
control what information they get,
Right.
and create an environment where you just don't question the leader or their teachings.
It's really sad to think about those kids
Hey, baby.
being deprived of a normal childhood
Yeah.
and subjected to that kind of psychological manipulation.
And remember, this school was allegedly supported by people like Patrick Bowler, the convicted drug trafficker.
Yeah. What does that tell us about SIF?
Their priorities.
Their commitment to protecting those children.
It's a question that needs to be answered.
It does. But it also makes you think about those former students and the impact of these experiences.
Long-term impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do they deal with the trauma of their childhoods?
Yeah.
How do they navigate life outside of SIF?
That's a great question.
It is. And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll hear from former students.
Of the Brahmachari school.
Yes, and examine how their time in SIF has affected them.
I'm ready. Lead the way. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's been a crazy journey so far.
It has, hasn't it? I mean, we've uncovered so much.
Yeah, allegations of financial misdeeds, political maneuvering,
Yeah.
and a school environment that felt more like control than education.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to the bigger picture.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, the stories we've heard really highlight the power of charisma
For sure.
and how it can be used to exploit people.
Yeah,
Chris Butler was obviously charismatic. I mean, people were drawn to him.
definitely.
His teachings, his personality, his whole aura of spiritual authority.
Right.
But how does charisma become a tool for control?
Think of it this way. Charisma, when it's combined with control over information
Okay.
and the isolation of members, it creates this environment
Where what?
where critical thinking gets stifled.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
People are afraid to question things.
Exactly.
Or disagree or even lose that connection they have.
To the group and to the charismatic leader.
Right. That's a classic cult tactic.
It is. They offer this sense of belonging,
Yeah.
purpose,
Okay.
even salvation.
Wow.
But the price is usually giving up your individual autonomy and critical thinking.
So how can we avoid falling into that trap? What should we look out for?
Well, one red flag is a leader who demands complete obedience
Okay.
and punishes anyone who disagrees.
Got it.
Well,
What else?
look for groups that isolate their members from the outside world.
Okay.
They'll control the information,
Yeah.
limit contact with family and friends who aren't part of the group.
It's like an echo chamber.
Exactly. You only hear the leader's voice.
Right. Anything else?
Yeah, keep an eye out for groups that really emphasize service.
Like seva.
Exactly.
But service is a good thing.
It can be.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful.
How so?
Be wary of groups that demand tons of your time,
Okay.
money, or energy,
Right.
especially if it mainly benefits the leadership or the organization itself.
It's about that balance of power, isn't it?
Exactly.
Is the relationship a two-way street?
Right. Is there give and take?
Or is one side taking advantage?
Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect,
Okay.
trust,
Uh-huh.
and fairness.
So if you feel pressured,
Manipulate.
like you're always giving but not receiving.
That's a huge red flag.
Right. We also heard from former members who struggled with things like anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Even after leaving SIF and having trouble trusting people.
These experiences really leave their mark.
They do. It's clear that they can have a long-lasting impact.
The psychological and emotional scars can be deep.
They can. Leaving a group like SIF is often just the beginning
Of the long
of
journey.
healing and recovery.
Exactly.
So what kind of support is out there for former cult members?
Where can they go for help?
That's a good question.
There are organizations like the Cult Awareness Network
Okay.
and the International Cultic Studies Association.
What do they do?
They offer all kinds of resources,
Like what?
information support groups, and counseling services for former members and their families.
That's great. It's so important to remember that recovering from these experiences takes time.
And support.
Right? No one should have to go through this alone.
No, they shouldn't. And there's also the issue of legal accountability.
Right. SIF has faced some serious allegations.
Uh-huh.
They need to be investigated.
They do. Holding organizations responsible for their actions. Especially when there's evidence of things like financial problems or potential abuse.
It's important.
It is. But those cases can be hard to prove.
Yeah.
It often comes down to what former members say.
Okay.
And any financial records or documents that back up their stories.
It's a complicated process.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's important for former members to know they have legal options.
Yeah.
And that they're not alone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important thing you want our listeners to remember?
I'd say it's about taking your power back.
Okay.
Be a critical thinker.
Uh-huh.
Question authority.
Yeah.
Trust your gut.
Right.
And if you find yourself in a situation that just feels off.
Don't be afraid to get help.
Exactly.
The stories we've explored today are a serious reminder that the search for spiritual enlightenment, meaning, and belonging can sometimes lead us down a dangerous path.
It's true. We have to be aware.
Protect ourselves.
And never stop thinking critically.
And for anyone out there who's been affected by the things we've talked about, please know that there's hope and help and healing out there for you.
You're not alone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of SIF and Chris Butler.
It's been real.
It has. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
Definitely.
And hopefully it will help people approach these kinds of situations
with awareness
and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep asking questions.
Keep digging deeper.
And keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Take care.